What's up, besties? I hope you're having a disconcerting day. I don't want to make this intro long, so what I'm going to say, because this doesn't really fit the type of content I'm uploading, is that I figured that since I'm doing much more like art related stuff than just drawing, maybe I should also record that and upload that, because I want to have time for more than one hobby, and I want to upload stuff related to more than one hobby, and that's more content, but I don't really have the right space to record that and the right equipment, so we'll see after this video, because I'm not sure if I'm able to make it look good, but yeah. Today I decided to sew a bag, and I swear I've seen a similar bag somewhere, but I don't know what the brand that created it is, and I think that one was like 3D, and mine will be flat. I'm going to show you like on drawing like what I mean by 3D. But yeah, I saw someone having it, and I figured I might also just do it myself. Disclaimer, I am not a professional, I am not even a person who knows a lot, who has read a lot, or who has done a lot. I'm a beginner too, so don't treat this as a tutorial. More just showing the process that I used. If you want to recreate it, you may want to like look up additional tutorials on stuff, because I just did things how I think they should be done by also like watching tutorials. This definitely can be done better, so this is just my process. I started by grabbing one of my favorite purses, and it's already quite small, so I didn't want to get any smaller. I actually got a little bigger, and first I analyzed how it's made to like know what shape the pattern I'm going to draw has to have to get a similar effect. And then I like very roughly outlined it, but it was just to get the size, not to get the actual shape, because I would need a ruler for that. It wasn't perfectly flat, so it wasn't possible to perfectly outline it. And also then like when I grabbed my zipper to check the size, I had to make it longer, especially that I only had one black zipper and like one green one, but the green one is even longer, so I had to adjust it to fit my zipper. And then I just grabbed the ruler and did one side very evenly with the ruler, and the shape is like I'm going to show you on the screen. You have to adjust the size yourself if you want to do something similar. I'm going to give you like my size, but yeah, don't do too closely to that. As you can see, there is like this bottom flap that is a rectangle, and there is this side flap that is like a trapeze, and the trapeze's bottom line is the exact same length as the side line of the rectangle, because they're going to be sewn together. And to get the general shape of this bag, you need two pieces like that. And yeah, once I drew one side, I just folded the page in half and cut it out all at once, because that was the easiest way to get it perfectly symmetrical. Then I also had to like sketch out the flap part of the bag, like the bat wing, and I actually ended up needing a bigger sheet of paper to do that. Like I did the whole bag on an A3 page, and here I put the bag part to like measure out how long the top has to be, and what I have to cover, and it took a lot of space, so I actually ended up typing two A3 pages to make one A2 page. And yeah, I just drew it out. I built it kind of, and I tried to keep my lines even. And the problem with this paper is that pencil doesn't really want to come off from it, so I ended up using a marker to just mark which lines are going to be the final ones. And yeah, it was the time to start actually making it out of fabric. Set a coffee table from living room to get more space to be able to put my fabric on. And then I just quickly laid down my pattern to make sure that it fits, because I was very anxious that I didn't get enough of the fabric. I actually ended up getting more than I needed, but yeah, I'm not that good at math, so I purposefully took a little more than I calculated I will need, and it wasn't necessary. But yeah, I don't regret it. I can use it for something else. And then I started cutting out the main bag pieces, like the outer part of the bag, and yeah, I just outlined it first. So here it is outlined, and then I decided to draw also the seam allowances. And with seam allowances, one thing I kept in mind is that it's always easier to cut something off that isn't supposed to be there than to add more fabric. Like, that's even possible. So I'm always quite generous with them, because I'm just scared I'm going to make a mistake, or I'm going to slip up while sewing and I'm going to make a hole. So yeah, I'm always leaving quite big seam allowances. I'm going to draw them in a second. And that's how it looks, except I think I should have just kept it all around. Like, I didn't actually cut right to the corner, but it just looks confusing. On the second piece I made a mistake here, and I ended up cutting wrong, so I wasted the fabric. And yeah, but essentially we need two pieces like this. And then I hand stitched these short 5cm lines, and I did it very loosely because this thread is about to be taken out. It's just so that it stays in place and it's prepared to be sewn on the machine. And then before I went to sew the actual thing, I made sure my machine settings are right. So I grabbed a piece of scrap fabric and I put it in to test things out. And I used the stitch that's called A on my machine. That is just a straight stitch that's in the middle, and I played a bit with the length of the stitch, and quickly found something satisfying. I later on ended up changing it to be a little bit longer. But yeah, that was my settings. And then, just to make sure we're on the same page on what we're stitching, I stitched these parts, like here on the pattern I'm showing you, together. Once I had them connected on both sides, on both of these pieces, I took out the lighter color thread that was there just to support it, and I stitched together both of these parts with the wrong sides out, so with the sticking out sides out, and then I stitched that together, and then I could just turn it over and it was nice and pretty outside, and all the stitches were inside, right, like it's supposed to be. Next, I started to do this wing flap thingy, and first I put my stencil on the fabric in a way that it covered some of that space that I started cutting wrong initially, so that it doesn't go to waste. And I've cut out that, obviously, with some allowance on all sides. And then for the second piece, because I needed two pieces, I put the stencil the other side up, upside down, I guess I could call it, so that when I put them together, both of the parts that have the sketching on them are inside, or firstly outside, but when I turn it over, both of them are inside. And here they are. Once I had these parts, I first hand stitched them and then stitched them on the machine together according to my lines, leaving the top part open, fully open, because it won't be visible at the end, and I wanted to have an easy way to turn it over. And once I did, I realized that it lost all its shape, like it didn't want to hold the spikes out. So I turned it over again, and I trimmed off the seam allowances so that they're smaller, so that they influence the shape less, but it still didn't really want to hold the shape, so I first pinned it to like have them somewhat visible, and then I changed and then I like hand stitched them, like using a chain stitch all around, using like a thick thread and pulling the fabric with my fingers out, so that the stitch forces it to stay in place, and it was better. It just came out really wrinkled, so I grabbed my iron and I wanted to iron it, but the iron hasn't been used for a very long time, so what I didn't know was that it was very dirty. It had like ash on it. I think it was ash anyway, because it didn't stain. I could just rub it off, but yeah, I first rubbed it on a towel because I don't really have like this standing thing is for the iron. I just put a towel on my desk to prevent any heat damage and went ahead. It's also like possible for me to record it this way, so yeah, you won't really get me sewing, but you can get me ironing, and it helped like a little bit, but still wasn't perfect. One thing that was left that I hoped would help were these like veins or bones. I'm not sure what these are like on the bats. I think those are like bones, right? These these fingers, I don't know. So one problem I had here is that I didn't have any thread that would be even close when it comes to the color of the one I just used, and I wanted to use purple, and I didn't have any purple thread, you know, like for the machine, so I took this whole thread, and you know, it's made out of like 7, 8, I don't know how many, I didn't count, smaller threads, so I took it out and I just was unwrapping and unwrapping and unwrapping, and this took me a long time, but I wrapped it around an empty spool, and thanks to that I had a little bit of color matching thread to make my veins out of, because I wanted to do them by machine and not by hand, because I figured it will look like more professional and less homemade, you know. Yeah, it was a painful process, but in the end it wasn't hard and did work, so that's great. So because I couldn't draw on it, because you know that's the outer side and I don't want any weird lines visible, I hand stitched the bones onto it, so that they work as a sketch, so that then when I do it by machine, you know, it's even. And yeah, as you can see, I did a small change because I figured that would be more anatomically correct, if that's the right term, and connected them to this little bump instead of it being like on the stencil. But aside from that, yeah, it was prepared to be machine stitched. And here it is done. All I have to do after it was to pull out these like support threads that I did as a sketch. Just look how little of this thread I had left at the end. Like, I barely did it, but I did. And honestly, I was quite satisfied with that. I didn't expect it to get this straightened, so that's great. And on the back, I actually didn't change the thread. Like the top thread was the purple one, but on the bottom thread I still used black, so on the back it looks like there's just a bunch of purple dots, but I think that's actually kind of cute. I forgot how visible lighter threads can be on dark backgrounds when it comes to that. Like, I thought it may be like fully black, but that's cute too. Like, I'm so happy with that. And this is how it looks done. Now we can move on to the inside of the bag. So for the inside, I wanted to have a little like compartment so that I can put like a notebook in one part and a sandwich in another part, or whatever. And I wanted to have a small pocket for like small things like, I don't know, coins or pens, or the things that if you throw them at the bottom of the bag, they're going to be lost forever. And but first, what I did was that I made two more pieces like the ones I did in the beginning for the outside of the bag, and I sewn these two 5 cm parts together once again, but I didn't sew these two pieces together just yet. I left them, with just the corners done. Then I started planning my pocket, and I first decided how big I wanted by comparing a piece of paper with my main back part stencil, so that I know that it's not too big and not too small. And then I started drawing it on a paper with a grid, so that I make it evenly. And the main part is, in my case, 10 by 13 centimeters. When it comes to seam allowances, this time I had to have them perfectly even too. So while planning, I had to draw them too, but it's a rectangle. So then later on, when it came to moving it onto my fabric, it was easy because I could just fold it. And I added 2 centimeters on all sides besides top. On top I added 3 centimeters because it's going to be folded in half like twice, but on top I actually stitched it twice too, so that it looks nice. So yeah, I think I should have made the sides a little bigger too, because later on I folded it a bit more than I planned because it didn't want to stay. But yeah, that was essentially the planning process, and I made myself another stencil. So first I have to like pin down the sides and the top, and I just folded it down like twice, so the ugly ends are hidden inside of the folded part, and I was ironing it down so it stays like this, but it didn't want to stay like this on its own, so I was also pinning it together. And yeah, as you can see, I was like barely touching the fabric with my fingers because it was getting really hot, but it didn't want to stay in place, so I was like folding more than it was necessary. And like, I'm kind of used to touching hot fabric because I work at a hotel and I have to like iron clothes with this like big machine. I can't find the translation of it. I'm going to show you like a photo of something like this on the screen so that you get it. But yeah, it gets really hot, so I'm used to touching a hot fabric, but I don't really like it, so I went the easy way and I folded a bit more than I planned. But I think that's okay, like it didn't have to be exactly the size, it just has to be even, and I did make it even in the end, so that was great. And I just folded all the sides twice inside, so the ugly ends are hidden, and I ironed it, and yeah, that's how it looks pinned, and I'm about to sew it. And then the first thing I did was sewing the top part twice, like one stitch at the very top and one stitch where the folded part ends, so it gets this nice finished look. And here you can see how it presents, and it's ready to be sewn into the bag. And then I grabbed one of my pieces of fabric I prepared for the inside of the bag, and I pinned my pocket inside of it to make sure that it's going to be inside the bag, of course. And I made sure it's not too high so that it doesn't get folded in later on, or it's not too close to the zipper or anything like that, but also that it's not too low so it doesn't fold to the bottom, that it's not part of the bottom of the bag. It was supposed to be on the side, but also that it doesn't go too far left or too far right, because then it could end up being like bent, and I didn't want that either. But I also didn't want it to be like perfectly in the middle, because I knew I'm not going to make it perfect. So I made sure it's very visible that it was purposefully off center, not just off center because I fucked up. And once I had it pinned, I just stitched very closely to the edge of the pocket, and yeah, it was done. So to make my little compartment, I first grabbed my main bag part stencil and I folded it all the sides to get just the flat back shape, and then I also folded the top because I didn't want it to get in the way of like the zipper or anything, so that the little compartment is shorter than the rest of the bag. And I first outlined it on my fabric, and then I outlined it once again to make this like symmetrical shape that I then later on cut out and folded in half, hiding my lines inside obviously. And I sewed it like very close to the top, to the part where it's folded in half, and then once again a few centimeters away to just help it to stay in the right shape. And that was the little compartment. It was quite an easy part, just a little wall. And that meant the time has come to assemble the inside of the bag. So first I like sandwiched the little compartment in between of these regular back parts, leaving all of the seam allowances and everything ugly like outside, and I hand stitched all the way on the bottom, because I started from the bottom because I wanted the compartment to be even and it didn't reach up to the top, so I started from the bottom. And first I hand stitched it. I actually hand stitched it twice. I first hand stitched one of the walls to the compartment and then the other, because I couldn't hold them all together like evenly. But once I had that done, it was much easier to align everything. So yeah, and first I machine stitched that, and then I took out the lighter thread and I hand stitched the sides, making sure everything is even and the compartment is nicely placed, and that I have all the seam allowances outside, as you can see. And yeah, I just machine stitched that, and yeah, that was the inside of the bag. Then I prepared the little hanging thingies that I attached the handle of the bag later on, and I simply just cut out 2 rectangles out of some scraps of the fabric. I just made sure they're identical, and then I folded their sides to the inside so that they meet there, and I stitched along the edges and I made like little crosses to make sure the folded part stays there, because it wasn't really important to like hide it as well as it was in case of the pocket, because this is going to be folded in half all the time anyway. And I'm lazy, but yeah, I just did 2 little rectangles. There isn't really much philosophy to that. And now it was finally the time to start assembling it. First I took the back parts and I pinned the seam allowances of the outer part to the inside, and for the outer part to the outside. So then when I sew them together, all the seam allowances are hidden. And then I slipped up because I decided to sew in the bat wing flap first, and I struggled a lot while doing it, while pinning it even, because I couldn't get it straight. When I got it like straight-ish, I just machine stitched it. It was quite easy. But then the time came to sew in these little hanging thingies before the handle to be attached, and I pinned them. And I realized that I probably should have done that before I did the flap. So I unstitched parts of it, but not the whole thing, because it was very hard to like get it in place. I seriously, I did like 5 times before I actually stitched it. It was crazy, like it did not want to be aligned. So I only unstitched a little bit of it, and I sewn in the little thingies with metal circles from an old bag into, to the inside of the outer part of the bag. And then I send. You need to forgive me, but I used hot glue to get the flap back in place because I didn't want to add any more stitches because it would look ugly from the outside. So I used hot glue and I glued it back in place, and then I just hand stitched a little bit to like be sure that it's not going to go anywhere. And yeah, I made my hand stitch invisible, but I still use the hot glue. I don't know, I feel bad about that, and that feels lazy, but I really did not want to redo it. But yeah, that's how I got the first part done. Then there was time for the moment I was most scared of, which is the zipper. First I grabbed it and I like sandwiched it in between the outer and inner part of the bag. And I started from the front and I just pinned it, and it was really hard to align, but in the end I did it. And then I moved to machine stitch it, and I fucked up because I stitched too far from the zipper and it wasn't attached, so I had to take out the whole stitch and redo it, but it worked. And then I pinned the other half, and I did it by like opening the zipper and pinning it, but also while pinning it, like constantly closing it to make sure it's nice and aligned. And luckily that worked, but then when I opened it and I wanted to stitch it by machine, it turned out that there is just too many layers of fabric in one place. And my machine just won't do it, so I hand stitched it. But like I did a pretty hand stitch this time, with a black thread to make it not as visible, and yeah, the general thing was done. It was the hardest part, like a lot of stress. I didn't really know what I was doing, but in the end it worked, so I'm not going to complain. It was harder to do than it looks. It worked. I'll pause on that. I wondered if I could maybe use a chain as a handle, or the handle I had from the previous bag, but the chain would be quite inconvenient, and the handle from another bag was from a totally different material. Like that was like faux leather, and here we're talking just fabric, regular fabric. So I had to make a handle too, but that was quite easy. I just cut out very long rectangle, folded the sides to the inside, folded that in half so that the ugly parts are hidden, and stitched along both the edges, and then I attached the little thingies that I cut off from the other handle, and yeah, that's just all it took. It was quite simple, just took a bit of time because doing stuff evenly takes time, but yeah, that's quite an uninteresting part. And here it is done. I'm going to put something inside so that it's more visible. I think it turned out cool. If you like it, I will use it, so Yeah, that's the most important. That's the most important part. And yeah, you can leave your opinions or like advice, or maybe propositions what I could do in the future in the comment section down below. And for now, just stay safe, stay hydrated, and peace.